So obviously most teenage mothers that I talk to have babies between the ages of birth and about 2 to 3. And so we'll talk about behavior management for those. So when I'm talking about an infant between the ages of birth to a year, most of the things you do to manage their behavior is like I said, you check on them to make sure they're okay and to see if everything's going okay and to make sure that they're comfortable and safe. But most of the things that they do can be ignored, right? And so if a baby is crying and it doesn't appear to have a reason, and you've walked around with your baby and your baby is still fussing, sometimes they just need to cry it out, and it's fine to let them cry it out, or you let them have a moment and you come back in a couple of minutes and check them again, and then go out and let them calm down on their own. Self-soothing is really important. Now, I'm not at all advocating ignoring your baby. I'm just saying sometimes they're just fussy and there's nothing you can do. And after you've done all those checks, and if you feel like there's nothing wrong with them, taking a minute to go outside to calm down, and giving your baby some time to just to cry, it's okay. So I want to say that crying is super frustrating, and it makes the anxiety level go up because we feel responsible for it. We feel like we can solve it, and sometimes you just can't. And so sometimes removing yourself from the situation and letting your baby cry it out and self-soothe is a good idea because it de-escalates the situation. So as your baby gets older, though, um, well, let me go back a little bit. So there is no discipline when it comes to a baby. So what I'm saying is, if, for instance, it is perfectly okay for a baby to pull your hair, and you might think, well, the baby's not supposed to, so I should smack their hand. Nope, that's actually not true. Your baby's a little scientist. That's their job, is to put things in their mouth, to yank and pull. And so you see my hair is down now, and I'm wearing a necklace and I'm wearing earrings. When my child was really young, I didn't do those things. When I was dealing with my infant, at home, I would have my hair back in a ponytail. I wouldn't wear earrings because they tend to rip them out of your ear, or they try to, break your necklace and whatnot. And so I just avoided those things. It's a small sacrifice, and it is appropriate for your baby to reach out and want to do these things. It's appropriate for a baby to put things in their mouth. It's appropriate for your baby to slap at your face. They are not trying to cause you pain. They're just feeling your face. They're trying to, see what it feels like. Obviously, I'm not saying stand there and allow your baby to smack you across the face. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they don't know any better. So slapping their hand or screaming in their face is not the appropriate response. So what the best thing to do is to separate your baby from you, and to, if your baby's hitting you, turn the baby around. If the baby continues, you put them in a safe space. So again, if you can ignore a baby's outcries, as long as you've checked on them, do that first. I know it sounds crazy, but ignoring as much of their negative behavior, as long as they're in a safe space and they're not able to do anything, that causes them harm, then do ignore it. Sometimes we can't ignore it, right? Let's say your child is playing and they've discovered how to open the front door. Well, then it's time for us to come up with an upper lock so that they can't get outside the door, because that is a big deal. That is a really big deal. And so let's say your child is trying to get out the front door, and you're frustrated and they seem to keep doing it, because anytime they see you get up to go, it seems like a game, right? And so you can't ignore that, obviously, because they'll head out the front door, but you can redirect and deflect. So redirecting means saying, oh, let's go outside, let's go in the backyard instead of the front yard. It's way better in the backyard. There's toys out there. We can go out there. I'll go out with you. So you're redirecting them to the backyard, and you're deflecting them by saying, let's play with this. Let's do that. And so it's kind of a way to say, let's not do this, let's do this, right? And so you're redirecting and deflecting. So ignore as much as you can, as long as they're in a safe space. Redirect and deflect is the next thing. And every once in a while, you need to confront. So let's go back to that hitting thing, where you pick up your baby and your baby hits you, right? And you turn your baby around and your baby tries to headbutt you. My son used to do that all the time, try to headbutt me. And so you move them into a place where they can't do that. And when you're at home, obviously you have to have a plan. So confrontation is always going to happen. So it's always good to have a plan. So in my classroom, I have a plan. I know that my kindergartners are not always going to be perfect, right? And so it's important for me to have that plan. And the plan in the classroom is to separate them. So I have a table in the back, and let's say a child has pulled another child's hair. I say, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to do that. You need to go back and sit at the back. We don't do that here in this space that I'm in. You're not allowed to touch anybody else. And so now you've been separated from polite society. And that's how we've done it for centuries. When someone has done something wrong, we separate them from polite society. And it's no different with children. Obviously, the consequences are very different, but we still do the same thing. We separate them. And so, for instance, in my classroom, a child pulls another child's hair. They might go to the back of the classroom and just sit at the table. I don't have them sit there very long. It's just a matter of once you do something, there is a consequence. And so they sit there for a minute, and I ignore them sitting over there, and I keep teaching my classroom, and then I have them come back to the group. It's just usually 30 seconds to a minute is the longest that I would do that. And they get really good at it. They understand I'm not allowed to do that. It keeps me from having to yell. In fact, let's talk about yelling while we're here. Yelling is your last resort. Yelling is sort of like pulling a fire alarm. So I save yelling for big things like you're going to fall, or don't pull the fire alarm, or you're not allowed to run outside the classroom, or whatever that is. And the same thing goes for when you're at home. Instead of yelling, you want to say, you almost want to get quieter. And I feel like getting quieter, if you ever notice when you whisper, everyone listens. It's kind of the same thing with children. And so if somebody does something really naughty, like pulling another child's hair, I always say, we're not allowed to do that. You may not sit here anymore. You need to go to the back of the room, because we do not do that to each other here. And so getting quieter, changing your voice tone helps the child realize, And the other thing about yelling is yelling makes everyone uncomfortable. And it's not fair to everyone in your household to have to listen to someone scream at someone else. And it's not fair in my classroom to yell at one student. It's upsetting to that student more than it needs to be, and it's really upsetting to the students around. But when you get quiet and they know, it's an immediate where they go sit down and they're quiet, it's a good idea. The other thing that you want to avoid is the lecture, right? I can't believe you're doing this. This is ridiculous. You do this every single day. Why can't you sit there without touching somebody? Blah, blah, blah. That is not going to work, and children tend to drown you out very quickly when you do things like that. So I try never to do that. Now, with my teenagers, I blow it all the time, right? I tend to get into those escalating things where, they get frustrated and I get frustrated. And anytime I can remind myself to go back down and de-escalate the situation and separate them, go take a minute and think about it. Let's talk about it in a little while. That's always a good thing. And so from infants all the way up to your teenage child, we need to de-escalate when we're parenting. And that's just a really good way to do it. Separate, come back to it in a little bit, and sort of go from there. So even though I say don't give the whole lecture, you're going to sit in your room. You've been naughty all day, blah, blah, blah. No, just, in my classroom, I'm sorry, you have to go sit over there. That's the end of the conversation. They don't want to listen to me. I don't want to listen to me. I don't like to be around people who do that sort of thing. And neither do the children. And so it is always a good idea to just separate. And once things have calmed down, then you can have the discussion. So when the child comes back to the floor to sit down, I say, okay, we're not going to touch each other, right? And yep, right. And then it's a loving embrace. It's a high five, saying you're going to do great. Obviously, it's my own children or your children. We can give them a cuddle and say, we don't do that, right? And so let's say that your baby has slapped you across the face and you're super frustrated and you're trying to explain it to your baby and you turn them around and they're trying to headbutt you, then again, you find a separating space that they're safe, right? And so while cribs are not the ideal place to put a child on a timeout, it is sometimes the only option, especially when we're teenage parents and we don't have an extra room to put a playpen. That's what I did for my youngest daughter. When she threw a fit, I would put her in the playpen and in the spare bedroom and let her scream it out. And it's fine. She has the right to be upset. She doesn't understand. She's working through this, but I have the right as the mom not to have to listen to it. And if I don't have to listen to it, it just brings everything down, right? I'm not going to listen to you, so you can cry as much as you want. And then they realize, well, nobody's listening, and they stop crying. So the same thing with a baby. You put the baby in, their crib for a minute if they've slapped you across the face, and you go, "Mommy doesn't like that." And then let them throw their fit for a few minutes, come back in, are you okay now? And if they're still screaming, go back out, come back in, are we okay now? And again, you just keep doing it and you say, Mommy loves you, but you can't hit me. Once they calm down, then you want to pick them up. It is important to sort of to give them positive feedback. So when you're doing what you're supposed to, then mommy will pick you up. When you're throwing a fit, mommy's not going to do that. I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to overreact, but I'm not going to give you a reaction by picking you up and loving you when you're throwing a major fit. You need a minute. And it's okay. It doesn't mean we don't love our babies. We totally love our babies. But, this is between the, ages of, like, let's say 8 months all the way to about 18 months to 2 years. Sometimes they need time away when they've, done something that's super naughty. And usually that's hitting and biting and scratching and kicking. Those things are not okay. Obviously, when you're trying to change a diaper, we understand, we ignore a lot of that. We have to change the diaper. They're going to kick and move and whatever, and that's just fine. But when they hit you and bite you and scratch you and kick you, it is okay to say, no, I'm sorry, and have a separate time. You don't want to go away and neglect them for hours, obviously. You go out a minute, come back in, check on them, go out, and you just keep doing this until they stop crying. Okay, so then when everything's over, they've calmed down, you give them that hug. You have the discussion. I'm so glad you're in a better mood. We never hit mommy. That's not okay, right? Again, there's a difference between hitting and biting and kicking and headbutting like my son used to do, and pulling your hair. That's not the same. When a child is pulling your hair, they're just trying to get your attention. They're trying to feel your hair, pulling in your necklace. They're not trying to be mean. They're just trying to look at your necklace or your earring. And so there's a differentiation between, really naughty behavior and just typical things. And so we kind of feel those things out as we go. Always a good idea to give your child a loving embrace and forgive and forget. You don't want to bring it up an hour later. Can you believe how naughty you were today? I'm just disgusted. Look at what you did earlier today. You just really want to let things go. They don't remember it anyway, so it just really is a no-win situation. So these are the things that I would suggest when you're under really stressful times, when your baby is being, really difficult or causes you some sort of harm. That's what I would suggest. And all the research and things, go into your Google and Google, appropriate behavior for yourself when dealing with your child. It's always a good idea.